This video is a compilation of all the horrifying creatures we looked at during Halloween season this year. This is the Bisty Beast, better known among scientists as Beastiheverser. Like most tyrannosaurs, it was from North America, specifically New Mexico. These powerful carnivores could be up to 30 feet long, and they possessed many traits that would be shown in later, much more derived tyrannosaurs. An endocranial study conducted in 2020 shed some light on its biology. This showed us two major factors. While their eyes may seem slightly small for their head, it's actually still in binocular vision, which would have given them better eyesight than any other predator in their territory. And it also showed us that they had a keen sense of smell. And there's also something called gaze stabilization. Many modern birds of prey share this feature with them as a way of keeping their eyes on a single target. They would pass these traits on to their descendants, giving them a much better chance in the future. And eventually, from creatures like these, we got Tyrannosaurus rex itself. It wouldn't be a spooky season without a proper horror movie villain. And while the film versions aren't all that accurate, the Megapiranha is still a very real animal. And they're possibly even more terrifying than their film counterparts. These piranha could be upwards of 20 pounds. And they had an incredibly powerful bite force, anywhere from 300 to 1,000 psi. It would allow them to bite straight through bone and even armored turtle shells. This was likely an adaptation due to their ecosystem, which contained multitudes of armored reptiles like crocodilians and turtles, as well as armored catfish. Some of those armored catfish are still around today. As opposed to their modern cousins' sharp triangular teeth, they had more broadened and flattened teeth. Because of this, it's been suggested that they're relatives of both the pacu and the piranha, and they may represent a transitional species between the two genuses. And if that's true, then they might also be omnivorous as opposed to strictly carnivores. Either way, I wouldn't want to get in the water and find out. We have some pretty impressive mammalian carnivores around today, but most of them would pale in comparison to what's basically an angry hippo that only eats meat. This is Andrewsarchus. There are a lot of depictions of this animal that differ quite greatly from others, and that's because these predators' placements were uncertain. They're almost certainly members of the Aerodactyls, but whether they're more basal Aerodactyls like this, or more evolved like something like this, is still kind of unsure. What we do know is that they're one of the largest mammalian carnivores to have ever existed. At one point it was suggested that they were the largest terrestrial mammalian carnivore to have ever existed, but that has since been disputed. What's not disputed is that these guys were powerful carnivores. And most scientists seem to agree that they were related to a monstrosity known as the entelodont, but we'll talk about those another time. It's estimated these beasts could get up to a ton in weight, and at its tallest point it was nearly as tall as a human. Truly a powerful beast from some long-lost era. The most powerful jaws in the animal kingdom come in a variety of shapes and sizes. For purely terrestrial animals, none could compare to Tyrannosaurus rex. A Tyrannosaur's jaws were capable of exerting over 12,000 pounds of force, or about 55,000 newtons if you prefer that measurement. But when you start going in the water, things get a little more dangerous. Meet Purosaurus. Their jaws were capable of exerting up to 16,000 pounds per square inch, or about 69,000 newtons. Nice. And yet neither of those even come close to the biggest contender on our list. Of course, it had to be the Megalodon, who could exert bite forces of up to 40,000 psi, or just shy of about 180,000 newtons. And these three predators share a common cause as to why their bites are so powerful. It's pretty easy, but I'll give you a second to think about it. If you couldn't guess, it was prey. They all evolved these extreme bite forces as a means of tackling their specified prey. Nature basically gave them jaws capable of crushing metal and said have fun. What's an animal that baffles you on how it ever existed in the first place? I'll go first. This animal is called Opabinia. They honestly look pretty terrifying, and if we were a lot smaller, they would be. But from the trunk to those eyes to that weird-looking body, God really must have just been experimenting back then. Carnotaurus is an incredibly popular dinosaur. And in the Jurassic Park novels, they have a terrifying secret. These monstrosities have the ability to camouflage. During the daytime, their camouflage isn't that great. But at night is when you should truly fear these stealthy predators. And this ain't your army dad's camouflage either. Their camouflage ability is so advanced that they can mimic the pattern of a chain link fence. And during the beginning of the novel, they nearly kill one of the main characters by ambushing him. Their camouflage is so effective that no other predatory dinosaurs will enter their territory at night. Even the velociraptors and tyrannosaurs were terrified of these guys. And even though they're smaller than their movie counterpart and even their real-life counterpart, they're still enormous animals. Standing at over 7 feet tall, that's the only reason they couldn't get to one of the characters while he hid in a shed. And creatures like this prove that Malcolm was right. Hammond went way too far and didn't understand the power he was messing with. And sure, these guys are terrifying, but you can't deny that they're just flat out awesome. Did you know that Komodo dragons are venomous? That's right, aside from being a 10-foot long vibe check, they also have toxic venom. Their venom is known as hemotoxin because it directly affects the blood. The venom acts like an anticoagulant and causes the prey to bleed profusely, which means even if you escaped from its powerful jaws, you could still bleed out. And given the fact that they can scent up to 6 miles away, they would very likely find you. The venom can also lower the victim's blood pressure as well as cause muscle paralysis. And it's been theorized that their relative, the Megalania, has the same features. If you're new here, Megalania is very similar to a Komodo dragon, except extinct and quite a bit larger. Most estimates average these guys at about 18 feet in length, but some of the higher estimates put them over 20 feet. And their size, along with their venom, would cause them to be a very serious threat to their prey, including animals like this Diprotodon and larger extinct species of kangaroos and wallabies. You know, I'm alright with the Komodo dragon being big and scary and all, but come on nature, if you're gonna make them venomous, you may as well just let them breathe fire. I'd honestly be much more okay with that. In the prehistoric oceans of the Miocene, a monster known as the Leviathan roamed. A powerful predator, this animal is known as Leviathan. They're part of a group of sperm whales that are known as Macroraptorial. What makes them different is that other sperm whales have a much more specialized diet. But for them, if you had a pulse, you were on the menu. Their diet would have included animals such as baleen whales, which would also put them in conflict with the other apex predator of the ocean at that time. That's right, even the monstrous Megalodon even had to worry about these guys. That being said, Leviathan wouldn't exactly be safe from a Megalodon either. And while there is likelihood that they would come into conflict on occasion, they would probably try to avoid conflict if anything. And if being a homicide note with flippers wasn't enough, these guys have a secret weapon. Like modern sperm whales, they would have had a spermaceti organ, which would have allowed them to use echolocation. Except as opposed to their modern cousins, these guys have 2 rows of teeth and some of the largest teeth of any animals to have ever existed. No wonder they could square up with a Megalodon. Jurassic Park isn't the only one with terrifying dinosaurs. A game known as The Isle created what is known as a strain of dinosaurs called hypoendocrine, and they are some true monsters. These dinosaurs are designed to be much more powerful than their standard counterparts, and even the smallest hypo, a Carnotaurus, was around the size of a standard T-Rex, and the others grew much larger. And they're not only massive beasts, but they're also incredibly fast, and only the fastest animals can avoid them. Oh, and if I didn't mention it already, they're armored. Their skin is basically bulletproof. And on top of that, they regenerate their health incredibly fast. But power often comes with a price, and they are no exception. But their negative is also a negative for everybody else. The hypos are in a constant state of starvation. And because of it, they have no time to do anything but hunt. And it's been said that the only reliable way to kill one is to starve it out. Which is of course much easier said than done. In this case, the Isle made some true monsters. This animal is Kelenken. They're part of a group known as terror birds. Remember, not all dinosaurs died in the KPG extinction, and so they had to come up with a new way to terrorize life on this planet. They're the largest member of the Forest Racidae, and the biggest estimates put them at up to 10 feet tall. And Kelenken's head is around the size of a horse. Even compared to other members of its own family, Kelenken is rather robust. He's like that cousin that becomes a gym rat after high school, and it made them capable of taking down exceptionally large prey for an animal of their size. Though it is assumed that they hunted animals mostly smaller than themselves. And a more recent study showed that the terror birds had very rigid skulls. Combined with their long neck, this would have allowed them to deliver powerful death blows to their prey. And I don't know about you, but just that hooked beak is enough to scare me off. Velociraptors are arguably the heart of the Jurassic Park franchise. And whether you're talking about the book or the film, most people agree that the Velociraptors are terrifying. But in the novel, their cold intelligence shines through even more. And there's also differences in their appearance. The top image is from the first Jurassic Park novel, and the bottom image is from the second. The raptors from both the book and the novel were based on Deinonychus, though in the novel they do have a more pointed snout like the real Velociraptor. And these guys had a forked tongue in the novels, which they likely didn't have in either Deinonychus or Velociraptor in real life. There is a fan theory that these animals were actually a Kilobator and not Velociraptor, but that theory doesn't hold much ground. But no matter what you think they are, it's their intelligence you should fear. And their bite, since they can chew through metal bars. And combining the two is unfortunately how you get a scene like this. In the second Jurassic Park novel, they use a man's own weight against him when they tug on the weapon in his hands, causing him to lose his balance and leaving him at their mercy. Not even to mention how they systematically swept through buildings in the first novel, which led to an incredibly tense scene between Alan Grant and 3 of the Velociraptors. Oh yeah, there's a bunch of raptors in the book, by the way. And it's only through Grant's intelligence and some luck that he manages to survive. Because unfortunately for the raptors, no one can refuse a good egg, even them. Oh, and that time that they toyed with Ellie at the fence, making her think she was the one distracting them when really they were the ones distracting her. I think Muldoon said it best. Tyrannosaurus Rex is often called the Tyrant Lizard King. But what makes them the king? To be honest with you, probably quite a bit more than most people expect. Now, of course, they're obviously huge animals. But they're not just enormous, they happen to be the heaviest carnivorous dinosaur. They could reach up to 9 tons, and some of the larger specimens like Sue and Stan could reach up to 10. Just for a reference, that's over 20,000 pounds. Not to mention the fact that they have the strongest bite force of any terrestrial animal. Measuring in at over 12,000 pounds per square inch, they could crush steel. But their most terrifying feature is their brain. It used to be a commonplace joke that tyrannosaurs didn't have the biggest brains, but we now know they actually had one of the largest brains compared to body size for a dinosaur. Studies of the brain case show us that their eyesight and their smell were highly developed. And because of those brain scans, we assume that they hunt similar to birds, which would require quick and decisive thinking and sometimes changing the strategy mid-attack. So yeah, T-Rex is not only strong and scary, but smart. Carnivores are not the only ones you should fear. I mean, Ankylosaurus was a living tank. These animals could reach over 25 feet long, and a big part of their danger is their armor. Aside from their underbelly, these guys are armored down to their eyelids. And their specialized armor, known as osteoderms, can be found in modern animals such as crocodilians today. And it's actually a pair of specialized osteoderms that make up this tail. These were some of the only herbivores that Tyrannosaurus would actually be cautious about. One swing from their tail could cripple the large animal. That being said, a Tyrannosaurus bite force could definitely penetrate parts of their armor, so an Ankylosaurus wasn't entirely safe either. But if you know anything about large modern herbivores, you know that they're not exactly friendly. Kinda comes with being hunted all the time. And there's no reason to assume Ankylosaurus would be much different. We should definitely stop giving carnivores all the credit for being the scary ones. We may not have found any aliens yet, but some animals on Earth are already alien enough. This is the viper dogfish, a modern species of shark. They use what's known as a hyomandibular bone to push their jaw forwards. It happens extremely quickly, and because of how wide their jaws are, they can take prey up to 40% of their body size, which they attract using bioluminescence. And their fang-like teeth help them keep a grasp on any of the prey they do catch. But at least they're only 2 feet long and don't have any acid for blood. One of the largest theropod dinosaurs is Spinosaurus. And whether you love them or hate them, they're one of the most popular and terrifying dinosaurs. Current estimates put these guys at over 45 feet in length and 8 tons, making them the longest carnivorous dinosaur of all time. And these guys were special as far as dinosaurs go because they were at least partially aquatic. And new research from earlier this year shows us that their dense bones would have allowed them to dive to greater depths than previously thought. In addition to those dense bones, they may have also had webbed feet, and they have a very paddle-like tail, as well as pressure sensors similar to modern-day crocodilians. These adaptations would not only allow it to be a successful predator in water, but around it as well. Their webbed feet would make it much easier for them to walk around the unstable sand. And because the tail is so large, it acts like a counterbalance, allowing them to walk bipedally. And it's currently thought that they were mainly ambush hunters. So yeah, even though they're mainly aquatic creature, you still don't want that smoke on land, because they would be more than happy to oblige. Triceratops is a powerful dinosaur from late Cretaceous North America, and they're one of the most well-defended and popular dinosaurs in the known world. And when they're adults, they could even give T-Rex a hard time. Not to say that a T-Rex couldn't bring down a Triceratops, but it would be no easy feat. Their size alone would be a warning enough for most other predators. At up to 30 feet long and 6 tons, it's comparable in size to modern-day elephants. And those horns are nothing to scoff at. Each of their brow horns could be up to 3 feet long, with their nasal horn up to a foot. And at the rear of the skull, they have a huge occipital condyle, which would allow them extensive head movements, especially side to side. It's thought that their horns were mainly used for mating purposes, with males clashing against males for the right to mate. Though some people think they're more like rhinos. Since both females and males have horns, it's thought that they were mainly used for self-defense. And if they have poor eyesight like rhinos do, then it doesn't matter if you're a T-Rex, a raptor, or some unfortunate hatchling. If you're in their vicinity, it's on sight.
Baboons are evil.
And they're not only evil, but they used to be much larger. This massive-looking baboon is a Dinopithecus, and they're double the size of the largest modern-day baboons. Modern-day baboons are the culprits of all sorts of crimes, like breaking into cars, to straight up just trying to mug people on the street. Now imagine this, but twice the size. Interactions between Dinopithecus and humans would likely be very different. Even ignoring their size, analysis of carbon isotopes in their teeth shows that they didn't eat that many leaves. Modern baboons are omnivores with a very wide diet, including a lot of leafy greens. But for Dinopithecus, that only accounted for about 2% of its diet. And despite being capable and more than likely willing to eat meat, they still mainly ate fruits. And their large size was likely an evolutionary adaptation to compete with other giant apes like Gigantopithecus, which they more than likely came in contact with, and perhaps even hunted them like modern baboons do to other monkeys today. Moral of the story is, just don't trust the baboons. As the face of Jurassic Park, Tyrannosaurus Rex has become a household name, mainly due to how powerful and terrifying these animals are. but the novel version has a certain menace to it that the film just doesn't match. In the novels, they were a mottled red and brown color. But other than that, they looked mostly the same. When it attacks their vehicle, it's described as methodically searching for its prey. And as opposed to the film where she knocks the car over in frustration, in the novel the Tyrannosaur literally throws the car, causing the car to get stuck in a tree. And then there's also the river raft scene, in which the Tyrannosaur, who had already claimed to kill, chases after Grant and the kids as they try to escape downriver. And it swam after them similar to a crocodile, and at one point even dives up from underneath them. And it only left them alone after the juvenile Tyrannosaur tried to claim its kill. And after chasing the juvenile off, it proceeded to follow them down the river. Like, you got a whole carcass right there and you're just gonna chase after these 3 humans? You can't convince me that that's not just straight malice. And that's just the first book. We haven't even talked yet about how much of a menace they are in the second. Another time then. This is the heaviest flying creature the world has ever seen. It's called Hatzegopteryx, and calling them big is kind of underselling it to you. With upwards of a 30-foot wingspan, these guys were the size of small planes. From what we can gather, they likely spent a lot of time on the ground like this. Quadrupedal locomotion would allow them to access a much wider range of prey. This would have allowed them to be the apex predators in their native ecosystem of Hattag Island, which is famously known for many dwarf dinosaurs, including dwarf sauropods and iguanodontids. But of course, these beautifully terrifying creatures could also take to the skies. Some folks have questioned in the past whether they could fly or not. But after analyzing their bone structure, we found that they had a rather sponge-like texture, which would allow their bones to be both strong and flexible enough to allow them to fly. Meaning whether it's the land or the sky, you weren't safe from these terrors. And there's always the possibility they spread out, but we don't quite know how far they would have went. But anywhere they went without large theropods, they would have been the most dangerous predators. Some of y'all are sleeping on pachycephalosaurs. Most people don't seem to understand how terrifying these dinosaurs really are. Sure, they're not the biggest dinosaur, and they're not even carnivores for that matter. But if there's one group of dinosaurs that really exhibits Black Air Force energy, it's them. And to be honest with you, they aren't really all that small compared to us. They only get about 4 or 5 feet tall, but they can get up to 15 feet long. Definitely large enough to want smoke with a human. Based on what we know about extant animals with similar equipment of similar size, these guys are probably fairly aggressive. But I get it, I'd be mad if I was bald too. But since they can ram their heads hard enough to dent seal, their bald head's gonna be everybody's problem. Did you know there used to be crocodiles that could effectively run on land? The worst part is it's not just one species, this evolved several different times. Some, like this animal King Kana, evolved during the Pleistocene, where they would compete with monsters like the Megalania for dominance. Their main prey would have been the large Australian megafauna that was around at the time, including animals like prehistoric kangaroos and diprotodons. And if you go back even farther in time, during the time of the dinosaurs, you have the Caprisuchus, a 20-foot-long croc capable of hunting dinosaurs, in the dinosaur's own natural home no less. And Caprisuchus also has a wicked set of jaws that led to its nickname, the boar croc. And just because they were incredibly dangerous on land doesn't mean they weren't also dangerous in the water. They were capable of this because of the way their legs had evolved, allowing them to position themselves upright more of the time. The most likely reason they ventured onto land in the first place was niche partitioning, allowing them to not compete as much for the same resources as other crocodilians, and allowing themselves a better shot at being successful. Let's all be thankful it didn't work out for them that way. Otherwise, situations like these might be a lot more realistic. The most famous prehistoric cat in history is the Smilodon, but you may know them better as the saber-toothed cat. Their most famous feature is those canine teeth, and in the largest species they could get up to 11 inches long. But studies show that these big cats don't actually have the strongest bite force and that those teeth are fairly fragile. So what made them so successful and so dangerous? It's how they use them. You see, their teeth aren't really made to pierce through bone or crush windpipes. Instead, they're made for precision. Smilodon, like many other cats, are ambush hunters. And their limbs, especially their forelimbs, are built much more robustly than modern-day cats, which suggests that, like lions, they were incredible jumpers. And likely they were even better than lions, who can jump up to 12 feet vertically. This would allow them to close the distance on their prey and use their powerful forelimbs to subdue the animal. And then they would move in with those powerful canines for the killing blow. Because of how large most of their prey was, their jaws could open incredibly wide, up to 110 degrees, allowing them to bite around and through even the thickest of necks and hide. So let's be thankful that their reliance on large prey is what likely caused their extinction. This tyrannosaur is known both as the Reaper of Death and the Death Harvester. This is Thanatothorestes. The original specimen was estimated to be about 26 feet long, and osteological evidence shows that this animal wasn't even fully mature, which means these powerful predators likely reached upwards of 30 feet in length. And similar to other members of its family, it possessed a powerful set of jaws. And it's also possible that, like their relative Daspletosaurus, they had sensory organs in their face, allowing them to detect pressure changes similar to a crocodile but on a much smaller scale. And on top of that, they've got these beautiful crests. So not only are they dangerous predators, but they look good while doing it too. But these Canadian terrors are a relatively recent discovery, and we don't know a lot about them yet. But what we do know is that they definitely have one of the coolest names of any dinosaur. Let's round off the Halloween season with a true creepy crawly. These guys are the giant sea scorpions, also known as Eurypterids. And while they're not actually scorpions, they share very similar morphology. But some sea scorpions, especially those in the Pterygotidae like this Jacalopteryx, were massive, reaching up to 8 feet long. And those within the Pterygotidae had large pincers. And in their heyday, they were the apex predators. But not all of them are massive, nor do they all have giant claws. The average Eurypterid is about 3 feet long, so still quite a bit bigger than most modern-day arthropods. These guys are also some of the oldest predators in the fossil record, with some species dating back to over 400 million years ago. And it's thought that their predatory nature may have driven the evolution of many species, including fish, which would make them an important species to nearly all vertebrate evolution on this planet, including us. Luckily for us humans, the last Eurypterid went extinct about 250 million years ago. And as unfortunate as that may be, at least when we take a dip in the ocean, we don't have to see anything like this.